me to jail right now. After all that my parents gave me, I can't do one thing for them.
And I start talking about that's the bank that took my parents' house.
You're on a public street, right?
The next thing I know, there are 50 people around me. And apparently people were taking video.
We'll get you out, we'll get you out.
It went all over the internet.
He called after he had been arrested to let us know that he was okay.
And I tell them, I kind of told the entire world, potentially, about your financial situation.
Which took us quite by surprise, took us aback a little bit. It wasn't something that we had thought of as public interest.
In her mouth. Okay, is he still alive?
What's coming out of her nose in her mouth?
425.
911 emergency.
Bring you up to date on what is going on.
5 people shot over the last 24 hours.
Random shootings. Police have no idea.
Got a shooting just occurred at 11.
Where? What's the address? We're going to be stretched here.
Hello?
The evening of October 2nd, I was sitting at the kitchen table with my wife having dinner, and I got a phone call from my deputy. There had been a shooting. I said, well, what do we have? Some sort of a robbery? He says, well, we really don't know right now.
Information about a white box
the
truck.
next morning, we started getting these different reports.
Every home game at Nationals Park, the Nationals bring out the 4 presidents from Mount Rushmore: Washington, Jefferson, Lincoln, and the great Theodore Roosevelt. And they participate in a foot race from the center field wall to the first base line.
Then into a government life to serve the people. He fought against corporate greed to try to make a change. And when his country...
They don't decide in advance most of the time who's going to win. There's one rule that they know they have to follow. Whoever is in that Teddy costume, under threat of God knows what, is not allowed to win. Teddy, what happened tonight? You had the lead!
When we first got married, we bought a house in Virginia. We didn't last very long in Virginia. We came right back to DC.
We kissed on the metro.
We did ice skating in the sculpture garden.
We have our bikes. We did roam around the city. We both work downtown.
And we walked out onto the balcony of the Kennedy Center and looked at the water and made out a lot.
We're working on our list of the top 100 Washingtonian restaurants.
Probably our best date was inauguration.
Going to like the Black Cat or 930 Club and listening to new music.
And then as we're driving home, we're like, let's go to the Capitol.
They're really interesting. I mean, they're really smooth on top, and if you touch the sides, they have this really prickly. Underneath them, they feel really, really weird. Their legs are all like spider legs and stuff.
Horseshoe crabs technically aren't crabs at all, and are most closely related to spiders and scorpions, not crustaceans. That being said, the horseshoe crab tail is perfectly harmless, and while a beach wriggling with sea bugs might look suggestive, the crabs reproduce externally. Females lay clutches of eggs in the sand, and a male, or sometimes several males, follow behind her or hitch a ride on her back to fertilize them. The next morning, the eggs are feasted on by migrating birds who need the protein and calories to complete their trip to the Arctic Circle.
And we're not buying what you're selling in 2012.
Because a lot of people believe this stuff.
You will hear from another man.
Is the America.
I want to nominate a man who's cool on the outside. But who burns for America on the inside.
Most importantly, the Democrats came out of that
convention with a greater sense of why they thought it was important to re-elect the president, what it was they liked about the president, and a belief that if they didn't re-elect him, bad things would happen under Governor Romney.
The GOP candidates may have focused on issues, but the Twitterverse's attention was elsewhere.
I've got Mr. Obama sitting here, and I just was going to ask him a couple questions. What do you mean, shut up?
And who could blame them? It was one of many instant memes in the campaign that provided fodder for online commenters and pundits.
We're in a race for delegates, and that means there are about 2,300 total delegates up for grabs in the primary process, and you need about 1,200 of those to become the Republican nominee. We're still very much in the infant stages. We've got just 345 delegates apportioned to date, with another 437 to be given out on Super Tuesday. There are 10 states in play all across the country on Super Tuesday, but there are a big 4 that you really should keep an eye on.
And we saw that happen in at least 2 Senate races tonight, 2 races that the Republicans should, if you looked at the sort of facts of the case and took the candidates out, should have won. Those 2 were Indiana and Missouri, and they lost both of them because they nominated a candidate who was too extreme, even in these fairly conservative states.
And in both cases, those candidates made some remarks that did not help their case, in both alienating female voters, legitimate rape, and then...
And if you add that to the 3 they lost in 2010 because they had the wrong candidates, Colorado, Delaware, and Nevada, 3 seats that they might have been able to win, that's 5 seats.
Back here at RFK Stadium, President George W. Bush right now is throwing out the ceremonial first pitch.
The town just went nuts.
And that park that night was packed. It was kind of crazy from there because they really, like I said, they didn't have any stars, and they started winning these bizarre games. They won all these one-run games. In June, they had this 10-game winning streak, got them into first place.
And it was a team that baseball people knew couldn't keep it up.
Let's look at a few of the scenarios on how Barack Obama gets to 270 electoral votes. Let's say he wins Florida and loses every other swing state. He wins. Let's say he wins Iowa and Wisconsin and loses the rest. He wins. And now let's say he wins Nevada and Colorado and loses all the other swing states. You guessed it, he wins.
People wanted to read it that moment. The Post was reporting information that nobody else was reporting. And that was Bob Woodward and that was Carl Bernstein.
Usually when you have a great story, it isn't exclusive very long because everybody else jumps on it. But with Watergate, I thought, if this is so great, where the hell is everybody else?
It's like, what did you get shot for? Oh, I was just on the basketball court, or I was just walking. So it's like people just shooting just to shoot now, just to make a name for themselves. For what? Like the person who shot me, I guarantee he don't know me.
Welcome to Wisconsin, the land of beer, cheese, football, and swing voters.
I don't know who I'm going to vote for yet. I'm still really on the fence.
I'm just confused about the whole thing, I guess.
I'm one of those swing voters, you know, and if I don't like a politician, I don't like them.
Nobody knows who to vote for because the economy is really out of whack.
I think it's just been a lot of independent people in this state.
I don't understand who would sell the thing. So, I mean.
Since 2000, the Orlando area's Puerto Rican population has increased by 104%, according to a 2012 Nielsen report. There are now about 300,000 Puerto Ricans living there, and they make up almost half of the total Latino population in the area.
I think in the Puerto Rican community is unique within the Hispanic community, obviously because of the fact that they, especially when they come here from the island, immediately they can vote for a presidential election.
A lot of Hispanics here, so our votes count a lot. So, por favor, vota por Obama, los latinos, para que los Estados Unidos sea más bueno para nosotros. I said, vote for Obama, so that way the economy get a lot better, because we go with Romney's. I'm going with a gut feeling in my heart, so,
But most of us don't really question our gender identity, but people who have gender dysphoria are people who question the gender that they are being raised in. So these are girls or female bodied individuals who feel they are boys, and vice versa.
You're not gonna get Miles. We're ready to fight.
The therapist just really confirmed what I already knew, which was that he is most likely transgender and that it's not likely to change, and with the consistency over time that's generally how they know that it's not going to change.
Always be exploring new things.
And we talked a bit about that, if it does change, that's okay too. That, it may just be gender variance, and he may live as a boy for a little while and then go back to being a girl. And, she said that's not likely, but it is possible, and we should just leave the door open for that.
Tonight on a jam-packed edition of The Fold, the fiscal cliff machinations just keep getting more complicated. We'll catch up with Lori Montgomery, direct from Capitol Hill, for the details on that. Posting a bad review on Yelp could get you sued. We'll have the latest on that lawsuit, and we'll speak to a woman who witnessed Pearl Harbor, actually reported on it 71 years ago tomorrow. She's still a spry 97 and a delight to talk to. And what made Albert Einstein's brain different than the rest of ours? We'll speak to the man who thinks he's discovered the answer to that. From the newsroom of the Washington Post, you are in The Fold. The political calculus of a fiscal cliff deal can be as head-spinning as the math behind the tax increases and spending cuts. Just today, reports that some Republicans want to go ahead and raise taxes. In word, the Republican Senate Majority Leader wants a vote on allowing the president to raise the debt ceiling without congressional approval. Of course, it's more complicated than it sounds. Lori Montgomery is on Capitol Hill to sort it out for us. And Lori, you had this story about some Republicans saying, let's just go ahead and raise the top tax rate back up to 39.6%. Why would they want to do that?
Well, it's not clear that they do want to do that. I mean, I think what Republicans are saying to John Boehner and their leaders is, look, we're ready to cry uncle here. The president won re-election. We understand that the situation we're in involves automatic tax hikes up to 39.6% on rich people and big tax hikes on everybody else. We're not willing to see taxes go up on everybody else. So, uncle, we're willing to give the president what he wants, higher rates for rich people. But they're not necessarily willing to go back up to 39.6. And the debate right now is how exactly do they cave?
And even as Republicans agree, quote unquote, to more revenue, I feel like a lot of us, including us here on The Fold, sometimes gloss over what they require, which is significant entitlement and spending cuts from Democrats. And I wonder if, even if the Republicans agree to these type of revenue increases, Democrats are going to do what the Republicans will insist on in order for there to be a deal.
Democrats are perfectly willing to talk about some changes to those programs, but the kind of changes Democrats are willing to consider are very different from what Republicans want. Republicans want things that will change the program in perpetuity, like raising the eligibility age for Medicare or applying a less generous measure of inflation to Social Security benefits so they grow more slowly forevermore. That saves a lot of money.
Part of Obama's last proposal suggested that in the future the debt ceiling could be raised without Congress having to pass something. Basically, the president, it's more complicated than this, but essentially would be able to do it on his lonesome. I'm glossing over. They do have to override a veto, whatever.
It is a Rube Goldberg-esque procedure that we have in place.
And we're going to have to raise it again roughly in February if we keep the mechanism we have now. Something interesting happened where the Republican Senate leader, Mitch McConnell, said, okay, you want this? We'll take a vote on it. And so why did he say that? And then Harry Reid had a back and forth. What was this all about?
Yeah, so Mitch McConnell does this a lot. What he does is he takes something that the president has thrown out there that he knows that Senate Democrats aren't wild about. And he says, you know what? The president wants this. Why don't we take a vote on it right now? And that sounds like Mitch McConnell is, doing what the president wants, right? But in fact, he's trying to demonstrate that Democrats really don't want to vote for this. So there was like silence for a while the Democrats tried to figure out how to respond to this provocation. And then Harry Reid, who's getting better at these situations because they crop up so often, said, okay, you know what? Why don't we do this vote? But my good friend Mitch McConnell, why don't we do it at a 50-vote threshold? So you agree not to filibuster it, and if it gets 51 votes, it will actually pass, because Democrats are pretty sure they got 51 votes for it. They just don't have 60. So Reid basically called McConnell's bluff, because if they'd gone ahead with the vote, it very likely could have passed. So McConnell's strategy sort of backfired.
Yeah, Reid was able to say that McConnell was trying to filibuster his own bill.
His own, yes, exactly.
Well, it's more of the same hijinks up there. But thanks for filling us in on it, Lori. Good to have you on the show.
Sure thing.
Betty McIntosh was a reporter for the Honolulu Star-Bulletin on that day in 1941 when a surprise attack on Pearl Harbor drew America into World War II. But the story describing what she witnessed went unseen for 71 years until the Post finally published it today. In a Virginia home filled with the relics of a remarkable life, McIntosh, now 97, still punches out prose on a vintage typewriter and recalled for us that Sunday morning when her radio crackled, Oahu is being attacked. When I think of Pearl Harbor, I think of that film that we've seen over and over again, the photos that I think are in this paper as well. And it's basically ships being destroyed. But what was new to me in your story was more of the personal impact of the attack.
Well, I think perhaps seeing at the hospital, emergency hospital in Honolulu.
You described them as the first victims of the war.
They were the first victims, right. Some of them were dead there in the halls. There was one little girl with her she had a jump rope on her hands. The rope had all been burned, but the wooden part of it was still in her hand. She was dead. Just like, it was so sad. And then there were bodies piled up, just dead. Some of them kind of bloody, but just like they didn't have room to do anything with them. I think it was just the feeling of fear, not knowing what was going to happen next.
And then you went and spent the next week reporting this story that we're now finally getting a chance to read. One of the things I wondered when I read it, you focus on the role of women. And I wondered if that was your choice or if that had something to do with the beat that you were allowed to cover, or why that subject?
Well, I think I was assigned to that by the editor, Mr. Riley Allen. He said, and this was at the time of when I reported in, he said, do something for the women, from a women's point of view. Mm. It was kind of hard to do because I couldn't figure out why the women should be any different from the men.
Well, you made a good case in your story. I bought it. And then you delivered the story, and then what happened?
Nothing came out in the first or the second editions. And so I was wondering what happened, and somebody said, the editor wants to see you. And so Riley called me in, and he said, I've decided not to print your story. He said, I think it would be too frightening for the women to read this.
The war led to a new career for McIntosh, spy. She spent decades with the CIA, but her first assignment in espionage was for the Office of Strategic Services and made use of her Japanese language skills.
At that point, I joined OSS, and they sent me to India, and where I did something called morale operations, which is just to write material for Japanese soldiers or the Japanese enemy to read, which would be completely it was not correct. It was all lies, but it was written in such a way that it would look like it was the complete truth.
Sounds like propaganda.
Yeah, it was called morale operations.
Okay, I'm sorry, wrong term.
That's the same idea. Well, one day we got a whole batch of cards that had already been censored. There were cards from Japanese soldiers to their home and their families at home. And we all sat down all night long rewriting them. I don't think I'm coming home. I found this Burma girl, and things like that. So we wondered what's happened when they got to Japan, because we were able to get them through the censorship and then on to Japan.
You broke up a lot of Japanese marriages, it sounds like.
I think we did. It didn't help the war much, but
but take that.
Yeah, it did sort of just quieted them down a bit.
What else would you want to say about your story? It's finally being published.
I'm glad it is, so people can see what it was like in those days. I think it illustrates a lot of what went on there. And hope they read it and find out that it happened once and it could happen again.
For more of what's making news this Thursday, we take our daily tour of 6 degrees of news. Egypt's Republican Guard deployed tanks around the presidential palace today after a night of heavy fighting between supporters and opponents of President Morsi. Critics are still demanding he rescind his extended presidential powers. Egypt's neighbor Syria was the subject of a conversation between Secretary of State Hillary Clinton and Russian diplomats today in a surprise meeting with the United Nations peace envoy for Syria. It could reportedly be a signal that Russia's support for Syria may be waning as Syria's civil war and concerns about their chemical weapons continue. And it looks like John McAfee's luck may also be waning. Police arrested him in Guatemala for entering the country illegally after he fled there from Belize, and he'll reportedly be returned to Belize. Authorities in Belize want to question him about the death of his neighbor. The software pioneer has had run-ins with the police in Belize in the past for allegedly possessing weapons and drug paraphernalia. There was plenty of such paraphernalia under the Seattle Space Needle this morning. Pot officially became legal in Washington state at midnight, and hundreds of people celebrated by lighting up, even though smoking pot in public is still technically against the law. Meanwhile, a prominent lawmaker is stepping down. South Carolina Republican Senator Jim DeMint announced today he's resigning his seat to take over the conservative think tank Heritage Foundation. And finally, a very different sort of foundation, the Grammy Foundation, announced its nominees last night. They included Mumford & Sons, Frank Ocean, and Fun. A lawsuit in Virginia may have you thinking twice next time you feel compelled to leave a bad review online. Virginia court reporter Justin Juvenile has been following the case and is here to tell us about a very interesting Yelp review turned into six-figure lawsuit. A woman didn't like what a contractor did on her home, wrote some really nasty things about him, and now he's suing for, what, $750,000?
$750,000 defamation suit.
And so the suit will go forward, but already yesterday the court started to act on these reviews she had left.
Yeah, the contractor went to court to ask for an injunction from keeping her from repeating some of the accusations that she made in these Yelp posts and future posts online. And he also asked for the court to have her delete part of the accusations in the Yelp posts. And the court agreed with the contractor and said she can't repeat some of these claims that she made in the Yelp posts.
So this is scary stuff that you could be out $750,000 for saying I didn't like someone on Yelp. So do we have a sense of what gets you in trouble, what you can say, what can't you say?
Yeah, I actually talked with a bunch of attorneys who gave me some tips if you're a reviewer online on what you can do to avoid being sued. And the biggest tip they gave me was stick to opinion. You can't be sued for, generally you can't be sued over an opinion. Opinions are protected by the First Amendment. Where most reviewers get into trouble is when they get into extended factual claims about what a restaurant or dry cleaner has done to them in their reviews.
But I remember from my old First Amendment classes in journalism school that the truth can't be libelous, so why should I be afraid about making a truthful claim?
Well, that is true. Truth is the ultimate defense in a defamation case. And they said if you're going to go down the route of posting factual statements in a Yelp review, make sure that your facts are airtight and that you can back up each assertion that you're making.
Yeah, because there seem to be a lot of people with regrets involved in this case, because even if what this woman says happened is factually true, she now has to spend thousands of dollars trying to prove it in court.
Yeah, or even tens of thousands of dollars. So she told me that she was shocked that she got dragged into court over a Yelp review. She never thought that this kind of thing would happen to her, and now she's looking at facing a bill that could be $50,000, $100,000 just to defend herself.
Is this a weird one-off or a trend?
No, it's actually part of a larger trend. Attorneys say that these kind of lawsuits are on the rise across the country, mainly because of the explosion in popularity of review sites like Yelp and Angie's List and TripAdvisor. A lot of people are not familiar with defamation laws. They're not familiar with what they can say and cannot say without getting in trouble. And also a lot of people feel, because they're posting anonymously, they can't get into trouble, but that's just not the case.
I have the impression I'm more likely to get in trouble if I go after a contractor with, big dollar work rather than a restaurant. Hey, my food was cold. Is that an accurate assumption?
Not necessarily. There have been cases over restaurants. There's been cases over doctors. There's been cases over dentists. There's a whole range of people that are taking people to court over their Yelp reviews.
Okay, bottom line, opinions, not facts, if we want to leave one-star reviews.
Exactly.
All right, Justin, thanks a lot.
Thank you.
For more than 50 years, scientists have wondered if Albert Einstein's brain was different than the rest of ours, and though it's been studied for decades, some of the first concrete findings identifying what's different about his brain are just being published now, and we're joined by Skype by one of the authors of that study, Dr. Fred Lepore, who's in New Brunswick, New Jersey. And Dr. Lepore, what is different about Einstein's brain? What did you discover?
If you look at the ridges and the grooves of the brain, the gyri and the sulci, he's got a different arrangement. Now, his brain isn't bigger, but the surface arrangement of the ridges and the grooves is very extraordinary. It is not, if you compare it to normal human brains, and there are atlases of normal human brains showing you normal surface anatomy, he has a very different prefrontal lobe. He has very different parietal lobes. He has very different primary motor cortex. I mean, the list goes on. It's sort of a laundry list of different parts of your brain.
Can you give us maybe an example or two of striking differences and what impact they may have had? Because some of them didn't seem like what you'd want to be a genius scientist. They seemed kind of at a right angle to that.
So let's say your parietal lobes. That's where it's kind of a place where a lot of information from the temporal lobes, the visual part of the occipital lobes, the language part in your temporal lobes, it all comes together. So that's kind of, I don't want to shortchange this, but it's kind of a synthetic area in the brain. And he had abnormally large parietal lobes. That's a striking thing. It's irrefutable that his brain is different than a normal human brain. But if you say, well, where did the theory of special relativity come from? We're not going to answer those questions. That's a big explanatory gap. The exciting part is this guy has a very, very different brain.
The story behind why it took more than half a century to reach that conclusion is pretty fascinating. His brain was donated to science, but it was sliced and diced up into literally hundreds of parts that were spread all over the world. And so this type of study has been hard to do, right?
It has been a real saga in trying to access the brain. He died at Princeton Hospital, and Thomas Harvey, the pathologist at Princeton Hospital at that time, did the routine autopsy, but he removed the brain. He sectioned it into 240 blocks. He took the photographs, and that's what this paper is about. He took the photographs. So we'll never see Einstein's intact brain again.
Last thing, in a phrase, what outstanding question would you like to have answered about Einstein's brain? Oh my God, your eyes just got so big.
What's the connection between form and function? What's the connection between that anatomy and this guy who saw the universe in a totally different way. We were just glad to be able to reconnoiter and look at the surface anatomy and see, is there anything a little different? And there certainly is.
Interesting stuff. Dr. Lepore, thanks a lot.
You're welcome.
That'll do it for us for tonight. We'll fold things up. Hope to see you back here tomorrow.